Making a catastrophic plan is not manifesting a bad birth or bringing bad energy or bad juju to your birth. Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of the Birth Lounge podcast. Boy, am I glad to see you today. I am officially in the third trimester of pregnancy. Holy cow, this has really flown by. I feel like it was just yesterday that I was telling you that I found out I was pregnant. And if you're sitting there being like, holy cow, I feel like you have been pregnant for a whole 6 days, so do I. I literally feel like I just found out that we were having a baby. And you want to know something? I thought that throughout this pregnancy, I would be chill, but I didn't think I would necessarily be this chill. I have no nursery. I have no baby shower planned. I have no registry. I have not a single piece of baby furniture or gear purchased. I have literally nothing except a baby in my belly. Now, I am super lucky that throughout the years as a doula, I have accumulated certain things. So should this baby come super early before we're able to get all of our ducks in a row, then I think we would be fine. But I think a lot of us chuckle because we think about moms being really anal and organized, and we are just so overly prepared. And by the time our baby gets here, it's like the nursery has been done for months and our gear has been washed and sanitized and put away 3 times over. And that has just not been my experience. And so I'm glad you're here. I hope that you enjoyed last week's episode of my second trimester update, where I shared everything that had happened in the second trimester and told you about my signs and my symptoms and the baby's growth and our experience there. And so now we are boogieing on into the third trimester. As we do that, I'm obviously starting to put together a more solid birth plan. Now, I know a lot about what I want, and there are things that I am flexible with and things that I'm not flexible with. And there are things that I know I want to be incorporated and things that I know that I don't want to be incorporated. But just like you, there are things that are still kind of question marks in this area for me. And so I'm going to be spending the next few weeks really putting down on paper my birth plan, keeping in mind that this is just a preference sheet. It is there to be flexible. It's there to be a communication tool between me and my care team, both my home birth midwifery team and my hospital midwifery team. And that leads me right into another care plan that you may not have necessarily thought about making before. I think so many of us make birth plans because we know about them. And if you're extra prepared, you probably make a C-section plan. And then your extra prepared moms are going to be making postpartum plans and maybe even a feeding plan where you talk about your options and get those down on paper for the people who are supporting you. But what about a plan when things in your birth go really awry? Now, obviously, this is not a fun, lighthearted topic. But if you're anything like me, then you find comfort in knowing that even if the unexpected happens, that you still are remaining in control. Today we're talking about what I have deemed as a catastrophe plan. And this has stemmed from my good friend, Kayleigh Summers, who you probably know her as the birth trauma mama. She's an AFE survivor, amniotic fluid embolism, And to be honest, we're lucky to have her around. Her experience with AFE almost killed her. Through our friendship, I have learned so much from Kayleigh, from flexibility to graciousness to things that she wished had gone differently in her birth, aside from the AFE. Obviously, the AFE was unpredictable and unpreventable, and something she wishes she had never experienced. However, there were things that followed her AFE experience that she wished she had thought of beforehand. I'm very lucky that not only am I her friend, but that she has shared so intimately about these things with me. As I have begun to make my own plan for my baby, I knew that I wanted to take that with me. And so I asked Kayleigh if she would join me on an episode to talk about the things that if you end up in the ICU or if you end up incapacitated during your birth, what are some of the options that you have? Now, I know when I said that, some of you probably clutched your pearls and gasped like, how in the world could you prompt me to think about such a dark thing? Here's the thing. Just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean that it's not a possibility. Just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean that it may not happen. It is rare, so rare. And I want you all listening to really hear me on that. It is so rare. The likelihood of something so severe happening that you end up in the ICU in your labor is almost non-existent. It is just so small. But what if? What if you are that statistic? What if you are that 1 in 100 people? If it was me, I would want to have a plan. I do want to have a plan. I'm putting together a plan. Kayleigh and I have talked on many occasions about the options that I have when it comes to these things. And I've spent many hours thinking about what I would want to happen to my body and with my baby and with the relationship between me and my medical staff. And how can Mr. HeHe advocate for that even if I am incapacitated? Now, I know that not everyone is going to be in a place to A, receive this information, and B, be open to having these conversations. And for those of you who are in that space, I want you to know that A, that's really valid, and B, I am not pressuring you to have this conversation at all. I think you should do what makes you feel safest and what is best for you, as always, right? But if you are someone like me and the unknown actually gives you more anxiety than having these hard conversations and knowing that if something were to happen, your preferences are not only known, but they're written down and you have a plan in place to make sure that they are honored and respected, then today is an episode that's going to absolutely change your life. We're going to talk about how do you broach this conversation with your partner when they probably are already feeling a little anxious and scared about labor themselves. I'm going to share with you how I did it at first, and let me just tell you, I didn't do it the right way. I make mistakes too, you guys, and I don't always present things in a really sensitive way, especially with my husband, who we've been together for 11 years at this point. A lot of times I just put things out there and hope that he catches them. I didn't realize when I was talking about this just how much it was impacting him. And so at some point throughout our conversations, I had to really regroup and rethink the way that I was bringing these topics up and the way that I was discussing them with him. We're also going to talk about who are the people that you want on your team if you were to encounter something like this. And then we're also, obviously, going to talk about the choices that you have. So, do you want your breast pump? Do you want your baby to have skin to skin? Do you want someone always in your room with you? And we're going to talk about what kind of questions you can ask your care team while you're still pregnant to help you not only get answers that you need in order to make your catastrophe plan, but also to help you understand what different protocols might look like should certain situations arise in your labor. Part of being uber prepared for birth is thinking through the lovely and jolly parts like skin to skin and the golden hour and pushing positions and fun pain relief techniques. But it's also on the other end of the spectrum, on that other flip side of the coin, it's having the hard conversations that in the moment may be scary, but on the other end of the conversation, not only do you feel informed and confident, but you also can rest assured knowing that your whole team knows where you stand on the decisions that may need to be made, and they know that they're the ones that will have to advocate for you, plus how to do that. One of the things that you can do to set your partner up when it comes to birth planning is to really equip them on exactly how can they advocate for you. And in my mind, in my brain, in my situation, for my personality, I think that setting my husband up to not only advocate for me in a home birth, but also in the scenario of a transfer, also in the scenario of a C-section, and also in the scenario of tragedy is the most sensitive and considerate thing that I can do for him. So with that, you may remember her from episode 276, where we discuss her amniotic fluid embolism. Please welcome back to the show, Kayleigh Summers. Kayleigh, welcome to the show again.
HeHe, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be back.
I'm so excited to have you back. Every time I have you on the show, I'm like really excited to talk about things with you because I love you so much, but they're always like such heavy topics. So it feels a
I
little
know.
weird to be like, yeah, so excited to have you. I'm a big proponent of having hard conversations so that when we get into hard situations, we are not left spiraling or unprepared and we can at least know our options. I actually was meeting with my own therapist this morning and we were talking about postpartum and she was like, it's really hard to plan for postpartum. And I said, yeah, but yes, and if I get into postpartum and I don't know any of my options, then it's almost as if I'm unprepared, right? Like it would be
Absolutely.
better for me to talk about my options now just so when I get into it, I at least know the different avenues and routes that I could take. I'm not trying to make a specific plan that I'm going to be rigid and inflexible and completely married to, but I don't want to get into postpartum and not have ever thought of any of these things. And coincidentally enough, and that is such a good segue into this conversation. And you have shared your past experience with AFE in episode 276 with us already. And
Yeah.
through our blossoming relationship, we have had many conversations about things that you wish you had known, or you wish you had a voice in, or things that you wish you had been able to make different decisions on. And so, I have asked you to mentor me through this as I'm starting to get ready to prepare for my own baby. And being the Uber planner that I am, I wanted to make what we've come up with as a catastrophe plan, which I
Yeah.
know a lot of people are like, what the hell is that? And like, why would we even make that? What the heck are they talking about? But I do think that even though births go in a catastrophic direction are very rare. One of the
Yes.
things I have learned from you is that if you have strong opinions, which I know everyone's so surprised to hear that I do, you probably want to have already thought about some of these things. So today we're going to talk about making a catastrophic birth plan just in case you find yourself in that situation.
Yeah, and I've loved our conversations leading up to this, HeHe, because I don't, it's almost like therapeutic for me too, because I don't get to have this conversation, thankfully, very often. And as most people in my community, it's always nice to be able to support and walk with others in this, hey, I really don't think this is going to happen to you. This is incredibly rare. All of those caveats. And also, it would have been nice had I thought of this prior to my experience, had I thought of anything to do with more of a catastrophic birth plan. And before we get into maybe more of the specifics, I think the first thing I want to say is that so much of this is about just having choice. Right. So even if things don't go the way that you want them to, even if you do have a complication, a catastrophic event, planning for these things beforehand, it doesn't mean it's good. You're going to do that exact thing, but even just having a choice in the matter makes it feel a heck of a lot different.
And that's the point of a plan, right? It's the same
Yep,
thing with a birth plan. Is it's not to plan out what your birth is going to be like, although some people
exactly.
do use it that way. And we're starting to see a shift of don't be inflexible and rigid with your birth plan. It will only fare worse for you, but use it more as a tool of understanding what your options are. If I meet this situation, now I know I can open door A, B, C, or D. Let me evaluate where I am and how I feel and which door is best for me in that situation. And that's what I want to talk about today. So, I guess a good jumping off place for us to be or to start with is what comes to your mind right off the bat, just like free flowing thoughts when I say think about a catastrophic birth plan.
Yeah, so many thoughts. I think the first, for some reason, I don't really know why, but the first thing that comes to my head is the separation. And what I mean by that is so often I hear from others who, especially who are maybe still conscious in their birth experience, when they are in maybe an OR setting, a C-section happens, and their baby is whisked away because they need NICU support. Who should your partner be going with if you have a partner? Should they be staying with you? Should they be going with the baby? And again, we know this can change, but maybe talking through with your partner what you both think would be best for you if that were to happen. And then if no one is going to the NICU with the baby, what kind of communication do you want? Should your partner at some point go down, right? We just want to have these conversations, even if we don't have answers to them. I think that's the part that's so important, is being able to start these conversations with our partners so that they know that this is like a choice that needs to be made in some of these circumstances. Go ahead.
The first thing that comes to my mind is while this is super scary for us as the pregnant woman, as the pregnant person, the carrying parent to talk about, bringing this up with your partner who probably already is very scared of birth can feel, for us, it can feel really heavy, but I think for them, so I'll just set the stage. My husband's in healthcare. So he's actually used to this. He's been an EMT for 13 years. He's used to emergencies. He's used to catastrophic events happening. I brought it up very willy-nilly the first time. I did not think I was going to trigger him. I did not think that him talking about bad things happening in birth would upset him. And I was really caught off guard in his resistance to have this conversation. And when I dug into it, he was like, "You are very different to me than any patient I will ever take care of. You are my wife. Like, I can take care of anybody in the world besides you and basically my parents and maybe my sister with a very kind of closed off lens. Like, you're a patient. I know the protocols. I'm here to save your life. Here are the things that we do." And he said, when I think about you in those situations, it actually elicits things in my body that I'm very uncomfortable with. Like, it scares me. Whereas I have seen true death, I have seen scenes that you couldn't even recreate in a movie as an EMT. I never really thought about that. And so I'd love to hear from you as a therapist point of view, especially for people who don't have a partner in medicine and you're not married to an EMT. You're just married to a regular person who has an average job and death is very new to them or something they've never thought about, or the medical system or setting is probably very uncomfortable for them. How do you think that we should approach these conversations? Because I tell you what, the first time I did, I was like, hey, we should probably think about if I like almost die and need to be on some sort of ventilator after birth. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I mean, yeah,
Casualness.
that could totally happen. And he was like, oh my God. And I was like, sorry, I guess, have you never thought about that? And he was like, no. So maybe not that approach. So
Not.
what would you say that someone should do in order to bring this up in a sensitive way for someone who, again, is not in healthcare?
Yeah, I love this question. And also, I would argue that it may have been actually not great that he's in. I actually think it made it worse
Oh,
because
probably.
he has seen, like, he can
Uh-huh.
actually conceptualize the tragicness of those situations and then apply it to you. So
Yeah.
I feel like actually even worse. However, I have a husband who like is very squeamish, can't stand medical things. So you can only imagine how that went. He For me, when I would think about this as both a therapist and again, someone who has a husband who does not want to talk about these things, I would approach it with, listen, as we're doing our postpartum planning, there is a small piece of this that feels difficult to talk about, even for me, but I know how important it is. And so I want us to find a time where we can talk about what it would look like to plan for something catastrophic happening in this birth. I know it's unlikely. I know it's probably not going to happen, but it actually makes me feel better to have a plan in place and to know that you and I are on the same page. So, when is a good time that you think you can wrap your head around that and we can sit down and talk about this? Because that gives us containment. It's going to happen at this certain time. We're going to open the can of worms. We're going to have this, again, nice contained time to talk about this, as opposed to, hey, so if I'm on a ventilator, in the middle of a random breakfast conversation.
Oh no, we were at one of our favorite Chinese restaurants, and now
There you go.
every time we go there, he's, hey, you're not gonna spring any conversations on me this
He's
time, are
legit
you?
traumatized.
I know.
So I would definitely preface it with that, like preface it by saying, "Hey, I want to have this conversation at some point in the near future." So that they can have a second to breathe and process that they need to have this conversation and then decide again what that containment looks like. Is it at home? Are you having a nice meal together? Are you having your favorite ice cream? Do some treats, add some treats to the not so fun conversation for sure.
Yeah, that definitely probably would have been a better approach for my husband. Poor guy. I just sprung it out there. And I do think there's a little bit of a desensitization with me where
Yes.
I also am very privy to these conversations and I also know a lot of what could happen. And I am that Uber planner, and you nailed it when you said it is super rare, but it makes me feel better. I had a list of things that I wanted to specifically talk about. Many of them I learned from you. So maybe we could go down this list, and as you think about things where you're like, oh yeah, and this came up in my experience, I wish we had a voice there. So for me, the first thing was the separation. I am so adamant that no matter what, that hospital is facilitating skin to skin. And I have gone so far to tell my husband, like, you might need to throw a fit. Like, you may literally need to truly advocate so hard that you're afraid you're going to upset the whole hospital system. And I don't care. I want skin to skin with our child. I do not want them spending every night and day in a NICU separated for us. And if they can't have skin to skin with me, I want you to be the one that is going to the NICU, and do not let them say things like, oh, you can only have this amount of time, or you can only do skin to skin with your hands. Make them take our baby out and give you skin to skin. We know the benefits of it, and it's super important to me. What was your experience with this, and what did you learn from your experience? Do you feel like there were places that you should have advocated harder, or you wish you had, or things that you learned that people can say to help achieve that?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite conversations to have because this is not something that I planned for, not something that I would have known to have people advocate for. And I honestly just got incredibly lucky because one, my son did really well and was resuscitated quickly. And so he didn't need to be in the NICU hooked up to any sort of support. And so my team made the decision to bring him from the nursery to my room while I was still on ECMO, which is the highest form of life support, and put him on my chest. And so to the point where even my husband, sweet, sweet man, was like, you can't put an 11-pound baby on her chest. You just told me she's critically ill. And they very kindly explained to him, like, not only are we going to need to do this, but it's actually not just for the baby, it's for Kayleigh too. And I have actually no doubt, as someone who deeply believes in medicine and deeply believes in the science that saved my life, I also deeply believe that I was able to recover and be removed from ECMO 2.5 days later, as opposed to the 2 weeks that they thought, because they brought my baby into me every single day for skin to skin while I was on life support. And that is something that I fight really hard for now for other moms who are in the ICU, because I think that we magnify the risks and don't take into account the benefits as much as we should. So we are often like, ICU, baby, can't do that. That's scary. And we don't consider the massive benefits to that critically ill patient, as well as obviously to the baby and their bond, which is, as we know, incredibly important.
Yeah, and I don't think either one of us are saying if it's obviously going to harm your baby to be out of
Of
the
course not.
NICU.
Of
Like,
course
but
not.
those situations are rare. Like, it actually is super rare that your baby isn't able to come and do skin to skin with you. And in the off chance that is true, chances are your partner will be able to go to the NICU and do some skin to skin. And it should be significant time. Well, we're not talking about like 10 or 15 minutes, like any sort of capped time. A lot of the procedures that they can do right there in the bassinet and the NICU, they can also do skin to skin while either they're on your chest or your partner's chest. So just make sure that you're having that conversation and like really being able to advocate for that, which I think is my second thing. We've had a lot of conversations around like hospital protocols and just how far does my husband need to go when advocating for me. And I think this is a really tough one, right? This is really hard because our home too believes very deeply in medicine. I challenge the system a lot more than my healthcare oriented husband. And I think a lot of the base of our conversations around advocacy has been, I've coined this phrase of put on your HeHe pants. If you know that I would want this, I need you to step out of your hospital administration brain and I need you to advocate for me like you're my husband, not like you're running a hospital. I genuinely need you to place me and the baby above your belief in medicine. And I think this can be very scary. A lot of us see people in white coats and we think, okay, they know best. They know best. I'm not going to challenge them. I'm not going to ask questions. What advice do you have? And maybe this is something that you learned from your husband in the aftermath or in conversations you guys have had in the years following your experience. But what advice do you have for partners who are maybe feeling that tug of, oh, I really want to advocate for them, but I'm not a doctor. How am I supposed to know what's best?
That is a very great question. And one that I struggle with, as well as my husband, of course, because I think it's different in so many different situations and experiences, like depending on what the status of you or your baby is, of course. But I also want to remind people that I don't know. I think my story is a really good example of the fact that if hospitals want to move mountains, they can. If they want to move mountains, they can. My baby was boarded for 14 days. He could have been discharged after about 4. They wanted him to leave the hospital with me. I know this is a special case. I know it can't always happen, but if it can happen, then we can advocate for it to happen. We can advocate for even, so this is something else that came up that I think is related to this HeHe, is when you were talking about, but if you can't do skin to skin, like that's very rare that would happen. There, of course, are circumstances. But in those circumstances, then I want, what's the next best thing? Can my partner, like you said, if no one can, what they did for me, even though they were doing skin to skin, is they would have a scent cloth with my baby, and then they would bring it to, they would switch them. So we would each have one and they would switch. And then when we get our scent on, and then they would switch. And they continue to do that. Is that the same as skin to skin? No, but it's something, right? So, like, how, even when we can't get the exact thing that we desire because of the medicine, because there's actually a reason, a scientific reason that cannot happen, what are we advocating that's a step down? Because this is not black and white. It's not yes or no. There's often other ways that we can make things happen that are just maybe like a step below what the initial desire was. Something else that I was thinking about as you were talking, I'm thinking about someone who is incapacitated. So say you ended up incapacitated, right? And you want your partner to be able to like advocate and put on his HeHe pants. I will often recommend that people leave a note in their husband's note app that says like their desires in a catastrophic situation. But also, like in this case, I would leave him a note that you can do this. You know what I want. Don't forget to fight for me. Like I'm still here. Like I know now I'm getting all teary, you're making me tear. But that like reminder, right? Because there's in these situations there's so much that happens that it is hard to know what way is up and what way is down, and you are traumatized. And so having that reminder, again, I know this seems maybe far-fetched. Hopefully no one's going to go through an experience like this that's listening or that is you. But if we're already preparing and writing some preferences down in his notes app, like why not leave a note that reminds him that like he has the power to advocate for you and he's the one that truly knows you best.
Yeah, okay, now you've got me thinking like if you know your partner's going to struggle with that, one thing that comes to my mind is have a designated point person that they could call and
Yes.
say, I need help. I'm not able to get through to the hospital team. I'm actually emotionally just not able to advocate for this.
Yes.
I'm very lucky that a lot of our friends and family are in healthcare. And so we have an abundance of people that would do that for us. And we also have an abundance of people who we could actually call for second opinions and that would come and be in Boston with us. I could call them in a drop of a hat, or he could, and they would fly out to us and help us advocate. Do you think that's a good idea to say, if you're not able to do this, call my mom, or let's use your mom, or my best friend? In your scenario, your best friend was pivotal in your story.
Absolutely. Yes, I would 100% agree with that. People need support. And
Yeah.
this is a lot for partners to shoulder. First of all, just like regular birth without trauma is a lot to shoulder, right? For the person giving birth, of course, and also for their partners. And so I think that this makes, I love this idea. It was something that was in my head too. Have a support person that you can call, have someone that you phone a friend.
Mhm.
Like, I'm out of my depth here. I don't know how, I cannot advocate. Because listen, when we talk about trauma in the pregnant individual, we often talk about how our ability to advocate is sometimes not accessible because of the trauma. When our brain is in that amygdala space, when it's in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, shut down, we actually can't access our ability to advocate. We're not in that reasoning prefrontal cortex. Guess what? If our partner is traumatized by this event, they also are not able to access how they would typically be advocating. And so we want to have an outside resource for them that's maybe a little bit removed, at least, that wasn't there when things went down, that can help them advocate in that situation.
Yeah. One of the things, and this is just a selfish plug here, one of the things that came up as you were talking is if you don't have somebody that's in your family or a close friend that can do that, a doula can help you do that. And they may have been at your birth. a good doula is not going to drop you after that, right? A good
No.
doula is still going to be very much involved in your care, checking in on you every day. If you're in the ICU, a lot of times the ICUs don't have a place for physically a doula to join you, but that doesn't mean that you can't call them, FaceTime them, text them, voice message them.
Yes.
Utilize your doula if you have one. And if you don't have one, it's never too late to reach out to your community and say, we've had an unexpected situation and our birth happened. Can you help me advocate? I'd like to give you a rundown on where we're at and what has happened and to just get your support in this.
Absolutely. I recommend doulas because I love doulas, but also when we're not even talking in the context of trauma, but when we're talking about a partner who we know is going to struggle to advocate, even in the typical run of birth, we are talking about a doula as a second support. Like they need a doula in that situation because there's already fear of the ability of that partner to be able to advocate for all like valid reasons. In a lot of cases, it's very valid reasons. And it's amazing that we know in advance. It's
Mhm.
much better than getting to the birth experience, realizing your partner's not going to be able to advocate for you and being stuck.
In terms of knowing in advance, would you say that it's a good idea? And this question is coming up for me because I'm a big protector. So I want to protect people from unnecessary trauma,
Mm-hmm.
but I also want to protect them from getting into a space where they feel unprepared. So I'm in this space where I'm being tugged both ways. I wouldn't want to have this conversation with one of my parents because I don't want to put fear in them. But I also wouldn't want something to happen and then my husband have to call them and say, "Hey, this has happened and I now need you to come and advocate for us." So, how do we navigate that? Should we maybe have a light conversation and just say, "Hey, if we ever need any sort of backup and advocacy, just know that we've chosen you as our point person. We obviously don't think anything's going to happen. Most births go, pretty well, but just know that you're our point person." And then you don't have to necessarily share this catastrophic plan with them. You don't have to necessarily talk about what you would want in these situations unless they ask. Or do you think, yes, this actually should be some sort of discussion?
It's a great question. I think it depends. I think everyone knows their family dynamic best. I can't speak to every family dynamic. I think that this idea of making them afraid, while I understand it, it's also the same thing as we're like, let's not scare pregnant people, but we're having this conversation for a reason, right? We're not scaring, we're preparing. And I think that it can absolutely be helpful if you think that they are going to be the main point person, like you have no faith in your partner to be able to advocate for you, which is, again, sometimes happens. We know people freeze in medical situations. It's totally fair. I do think that the conversation should be with whoever that point person is about some of the specifics. But again, if this is a backup, no, I do not think so. That's your choice. But if this is, I think my partner can handle this, but if he's so overwhelmed or if she's so overwhelmed, then maybe we'll want someone to come in to help support, have that conversation in the same way that you would be like, hey, I think we have childcare lined up, but in case I go into labor in the middle of the night, you guys need to be on backup to come here. You know what I mean? It's like a similar conversation in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the personality of that person too matters a lot, right? So if it's someone who I'm thinking about my own point person, they're in healthcare as well. They work in the hospital. So I actually don't think this conversation would scare them. I think it would be a conversation that they felt probably really grounded in, and they would go into it being like, wow, okay, I'm so glad that we had this conversation, especially knowing I'm her second point person and now I know exactly what she wants. I think that would probably be good. I don't think I would ever sit down with either one of our parents and say that because I think it would give them unnecessary anxiety, even though they should know you are one of our point people. So yeah, considering the personality of that person too is probably really important.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, what about feeding your baby? So I think a lot of people have strong feelings about breastfeeding, right? So many women want to go into it breastfeeding. I think when something catastrophic happens, it can be really easy to just assume that your baby will be given formula because that's just what's there. But in your situation, you actually experienced being pumped by your hospital team, and you have some feelings about that on the other end of it. Would you talk to us about that? And then also maybe what should we be thinking about when we're making our catastrophic plan on what our options are here?
Yeah, yeah. This is a conversation I also really love to have. I do feel like I had a bit of obviously an interesting and rare experience. So my team made the decision because I said I wanted to breastfeed from the get. They made the decision with the blessing of my family, the consent of my family, to pump me while I was on ECMO, intubated and sedated. The goal of that, of course, to keep my milk supply intact. And I feel really grateful for that decision that was made based on the information that they had at the time. And I also have like icky feelings. And I think this is a conversation that's really hard for people to hold two things at the same time because I think nurses often feel like, what was I supposed to do? Exactly what you did. And it doesn't mean that I don't still have feelings about it. These are not like fixable feelings, and that's okay. And so I think a lot of nurses are looking for the right answer. And the right answer, I think, comes from planning. Because I talk about this all the time, it won't make sense to a lot of people, but had I said, hey, if I am unconscious, if I am intubated, I would like to be pumped to keep my milk supply for the chance at me breastfeeding. If I had made that decision, I can tell you right now, I would feel 1,000 times better about it happening. But I didn't get a choice along with all of the other intrusive medical things that happened to my body, which I would again choose over and over again to be here. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't get a say in it. And that felt like another thing that I didn't get a say in. So, one, on the kind of back end here, I would absolutely make it known what you would like to do if you are incapacitated, unconscious. Do you want to be pumped? And then I would also figure out what you want the other plan for feeding for your baby to be. If like you're not getting enough milk, if this is like an extended situation, do you want donor milk? Is that an option at your hospital? And if not, do you want formula? What do you want that exact journey to look like? And then the thing that I really want to get across and that I want you to say to yourself in this plan that you are making is that your decision is allowed to change when you wake up. When you come out of sedation, your plan is allowed to change regardless of what was done for you and regardless of what you said to begin with. Because I have so many people who will say, I would absolutely choose to be pumped. And I was like, actually, same. But until you actually go through it, you have no idea what that is like. And yes, I wanted the best for my baby, but I was suffering. I had fractured ribs. I had chest tubes still in. I had an open abdomen. They were pumping my breasts every 4 hours. And I would just cry. And no one revisited the conversation with me. No one came up to me and said, hey, Kayleigh, yes, we've been pumping for you, but where are you at now? Are you still interested in breastfeeding? If you are, we will support the bejesus out of you. Like, we got you, clearly. Or are you interested in taking a break? Is your body feeling done? We will also support you. Your baby will be fine. But let us know where you're at. No one revisited that with me. So what ended up happening is I thought I can't change my decision because they'd meant all of this effort to pump me. They did all of this work to keep my milk supply intact. And to be a good mom, I have to breastfeed. That's not actually true. That's just how I felt. And I already screwed up the birth experience. Again, not actually true, just how I felt at the time. So this is the only thing I can do right. So I'm not going to stop until my lovely family stepped in and took the lactation consultant outside my room and said, hey, so we need you to give her the option to stop. We're not saying she has to, but you need to tell her that her baby will be okay if she stops. Also, I was getting zero. I had zero milk supply. So 7, 8, 9, 10 days into this, we were getting like teeny tiny bits, not even. And so Eventually, the lactation consultant did come in and let me know this. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. This is terrible. And then what I wish would have happened from there, which is a separate conversation, but I'm just going to get it in there, is that I wish the lactation consultant would have said, and there are all these other options. You could relactate at some point. You could combo feed. You could breastfeed for comfort. You could do all these things that could still help with bonding. But instead, it was you're either going to continue to pump every 4 hours to keep up your milk supply and be able to feed your baby with breast milk, or you're going to use formula.
Got it. This is something that you could talk to your partner about. Hey,
Yes.
if I'm unconscious, when I wake up, I would like to check in on all the things that we have talked about and all of this hypothetical plan that we're making, just to make sure that I still feel good with the decisions that I've made at this point in pregnancy, and that I want to continue doing whatever you guys have implemented since I have been unconscious. I think that's a really great place that you can give your partner or your point person some good control, especially in a situation where a lot of partners feel so out of control.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a great conversation to have.
A hard one though, right? It's what you said is we have all this stuff going. We're on a roll here, especially if you are showing signs of improvement and you're getting
Mhm.
better each day. You're getting stronger each day and you're starting to get really good reports. We don't think she's going to need ECMO for 14 days. We might be able to take her off after 12. Hey, we don't even think we're going to need 12. We might be able to take her off by the end of the week. It can feel really hard for your partner to then go back and say, I need to pause this conversation because now that she's awake, we want to revisit all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard to be the person who all of this happened to, and then to wake up and have everyone continue to treat you like you're not actually in the room.
Oh.
And that happened a lot. And I don't think maliciously at all. One, it's definitely the nature of an ICU, which has a lot of patients who are intubated and sedated. And two, I was a shell of myself. So I think really making sure that we direct that, like giving back, handing back autonomy when someone is now conscious and aware and able to make decisions is a really important step in healing for that person too.
Would you say for any ICU nurses or practitioners out there listening that even if someone is unconscious and sedated, talking to that patient directly and just saying, okay, you came up with the care plan, you know what you're going to do. My nature is to ask, hey, Kayleigh, this is what your care team has come up with. You can't really say, are you okay with that? That person is sedated and they're not going to answer you back. So that's a really tough place when it comes to consent. But we also know the data behind talking to unconscious and sedated patients. A lot of times we can hear you. We may not be able to respond, but there's a lot of times where we can understand what you're saying and our brains can consciously conceptualize that. Do you think that them turning to you and saying, hey, Kayleigh, I just wanted to keep you up to date on what our next steps are. Here's what we're going to do today. And we'll check in with you tonight. And if you're still at the same place, we're going to continue this for the next couple days. But when I leave tomorrow morning, I'll keep your nurse up to date and we can check back in with you. Like something along those lines.
Absolutely. 100%. I think we should definitely be talking to intubated, sedated patients. We have so much information on ICU delirium and psychosis. And I did not experience that, thankfully, but I know a ton of AFE survivors who did. And our brains make up crazy stories. So being able to ground a patient by talking to them and talking to them about what's happening to their body is so important. Hey, Kayleigh, I know you made the decision prior to this to breastfeed. And so what we're doing is we are going to put some pumps right now on your breasts to try to keep up your milk supply. That's what we're going to do right now. And then, like you said, and we'll check back in with you to see where you're at tonight, to see if we continue this for et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that just feels really special to me that while you can't necessarily verbally consent, I do think there's definitely something for your medical staff just keeping you up to date in your care plan, regardless of if you are able to truly hear it. And like you said, like some people aren't going to experience that, but on the off chance that you do, I do think that it would just be so much better, which kind of leads me to my next question. Something to think about, I think, is whether you want to be alone or not, which can feel hard because when I think about that, I'm thinking, gosh, what am I asking from the people that are in my life? Like 24/7, I want someone at the hospital with me. That means my husband and my mother-in-law and my mother and my father-in-law and maybe both of our sisters have to do round the clock care for me at the hospital, but I am the personality that I would not want to be alone. If I woke up and it was just me and my medical staff, I would be so sad. I wouldn't feel scared. I would know that I was safe and I would know that I was in trusted hands, but I would feel sad that I woke up and someone that I knew wasn't there.
Yeah, I think that we all have different needs. I think that we all have different levels of access to that type of support. So I want to be like cognizant and aware of that. But when I'll be honest about my reaction, when you were like, I want someone that's a lot to ask. I was like, I don't give a fuck.
Dead here?
Yeah, I like actually the like part of me from like that experience of being in the ICUs, I was like, I was terrified that I was going to die again. So I was like, yeah, so no one will leave. Once I was conscious and aware, no one had actually left me before that. My husband slept over every night in the ICU. And then when I was conscious, I was like, no one will leave me. I was never alone for a single minute of the rest of my ICU stay. And I don't feel like I was a burden. I needed that. I was terrified. My mom and my husband switched off sleeping in the ICU once I was conscious. They were like, Steve needs a break. I was like, totally. But who's up?
Yeah.
Because I'm not sleeping alone in the ICU. Like, it's just not happening. So while some people may view that as like a lot, that I don't care. I could not have survived. I'm so lucky to have that level of support available to me because I don't know how people do it. I have friends from the AFE community who had their AFE during COVID. Guess what? No one's there because they're not allowed to be. And so that is a level of isolation and just like awfulness that is hard to explain. So I agree in trying to set it up so that you have lots of support so that someone is there, especially when you wake up for the first time. I think that piece is really important. Something else I'll add before I forget, because I don't know if we'll get to this question specifically, is pictures and videos.
Oh, yeah.
So you need to make a decision, not me, you don't need to, but I would suggest that you make a decision in advance about whether you want videos and pictures taken from your ICU stay if you end up, again, on the very rare occasion that you would have an ICU stay after your birth or during your birth. It may seem odd, but I will tell you that there is not a single person that I have met from the birth trauma community who doesn't wish they had more pictures and videos from their time. I'm not saying that they're not hard to look at or that they take years sometimes to look at them, but that is time that we did not get to be present. And often it's our baby's first days of life. I have a shared drive of over 1,000 pictures and videos, and I am still like, why didn't you take a video of that one very specific thing? Why didn't you get that on video? The picture's not good enough. Why aren't there more video? Like, we are hungry to fill in the gaps of the time that we were not there for. And I always like to say, because I will advocate for this for families that I'm in contact with whose loved ones are still unconscious as we are speaking. I will advocate for this and I will tell them that pictures can always be deleted. Pictures can always be kept away from that person until they are ready. They can always be deleted if that's what they ask, but we can't come up with pictures that we never took or videos that we never took. And so I am constantly encouraging people, along with getting the baby into skin on skin, is to also take pictures and videos of their loved ones.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that would have never crossed my mind. Okay, what else are some things that, as someone who's never been through a catastrophic event, we might want to think about?
Yeah. So, along with, I meant to mention this when you were talking about the nurses or medical providers coming in and talking to the patient while they're intubated and sedated. I would think about, I am constantly telling nurses in the ICU to debrief patients every day on what happened to them. And I'm talking like 2 sentences. Like, Kayleigh, you're in the CTICU at Lincoln. You had an amniotic fluid embolism. You are okay. We are taking care of you. Your baby is okay. He's up in the nursery doing well. That should be said to a patient every single day. And as a family, you can advocate for that. And so that's something you're going to want to tell your family in advance. Like, people should be telling me what happened to me every day. Because again, sometimes we can hear, sometimes we know, and we make up weird stories in our brain about what happened to us and to our babies. And most people do not think that their baby is alive. I will tell you that much. So, reminding patients again, and as family, and as you're talking to your family or your partner to prepare for this, telling them to advocate for a medical provider or them. They can do it themselves. I've actually heard this is an interesting point from, if you've never listened to Kayleigh Dayton before, she's awesome. She is an ICU nurse and she talks about awake and walking ICUs, which is a totally different conversation. But it's there's just much better outcomes. And the way that we sedate patients is often really harmful to them. And it causes a lot of ICU delirium. So a point that she makes is actually to have someone that the patient knows debrief them. So to have your partner say what I just said is actually sometimes more helpful, because there's less room for our brain to like be like, they're lying. Like, I don't trust them. I don't know who this person is. So as I'm talking, I'm realizing, like, even just advocating for your partner or family member to tell you what happened in 2 short sentences. And you can ask the medical team, hey, what are 2 short sentences that I can say to my loved one? Because I have no idea what the heck is going on. What is the diagnosis? What can I tell them that would comfort them in 2 short sentences? And they should be able to help you with that.
And why 2 short sentences? Just because we want it brief and direct?
Yeah, someone's still sedated and intubated. We don't want to go on and on in a whole story and add all the details, especially when they can't like ask questions
Mm,
if they're still sedated. So we just want a very brief overview of what's going on.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, what else comes to your mind?
I think maybe communication. So, what I mean by that, and this of course could happen after, but it may be really helpful to your partner to figure out who is going to communicate updates. So, it's probably not going to be your partner. That's a lot. They need to be focused on you and your care. So, who is going to be the person that is sending out all of the updates? Can
Mm, to like friends and family is what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yes, to like the close insular people. I'm not necessarily talking about big, but the people who knew you were in labor and are worried about you and wondering how you are. And also, good point, decide if you would want people to know. What kind of details do you want the rest of your close-knit family? Do you want nothing on social media? Because my family was like, nothing, a single thing will go on social media. And I felt very good about that. No one posted my baby before I got the chance to. But that's something to talk about. Another thing is, and again, we can only anticipate what we think will be best. We can't know how we will actually feel about this, but can other people hold your baby? And like, what's the like time frame here? If it's 48 hours, like, your partner can hold your baby, maybe your parents can, but you don't want anyone else holding your baby until you get to. But I was like a full week. And so there was probably like 50 people who held my baby before me. And do I have grief over that? 100%. And also, I'm glad. I hate the circumstances, but I'm glad that he was held and loved on by so many people who love me. But things to think about, right?
Yeah. Wow, those are tough. Okay, something that we've talked about a lot is life support.
Mhm.
And this is something that I talked to you and the other ladies at the AFE Foundation. And I had very strong feelings about it when we first talked. And I was like, here's my line in the sand. I don't want to be kept on for more than this many days. And yeah, you're making that face because you were like, we have
I
a
was like, could I
lot of,
convince you for a few
yeah.
more days?
And look, you did. You
No,
did. And I think that not only was your approach really good, but I think you were able to back it up with a lot of not only data, but anecdotal stories of this time may not be enough. And you never were trying to actually convince me. I know you just used that
no,
word, but like, you were never saying like, "Hey, HeHe, you're not giving yourself enough time." But what you were saying is if you wanted to consider a couple of more days, we've got a lot of stories of people who've made massive improvements in these days. And so just consider it. And I think this is something, all of this obviously is so sensitive and so personal, but this one
totally.
in particular is just really sensitive and personal of how long would you want to be kept on life support? And I think there's a lot of factors that go into this. Are you showing improvement? Are you actually showing regressions? Is your body getting weaker? Are you showing less signs of life and recovery? Is your brain activity getting weaker? If you're not going in the what we call the right direction or a positive direction, a stronger direction, this may impact things. But thanks to your conversation, thanks to my conversation with you, I actually did extend that time. And I came home and I talked to my husband and I said, I think I'm going to extend that time by a week. And so now I feel comfortable with this amount of time. And I left the caveat of if you and my medical team feel like more days are warranted without it being a long shot. So, my main thing is I never want you guys to be keeping me alive on basically this flutter of hope. I don't want to be kept alive for weeks or months on the off chance that I will recover. I want us to truly be making evidence-based decisions. So if we get to what my personal boundary is, and I'm showing a lot of really good positive signs, you have my consent and permission to keep going. But if at that day it really looks not great, I want there to be a serious conversation. And this is, oh my God, this was a conversation we both cried at. I could cry at it right now. Like trying to think about pulling the plug on someone that you love. It's really hard. It's like such a horrible conversation. But I also know that it goes back to what you said about I feel so confident in being able to make that decision. And I think that has given me the preparedness that I need going into this conversation and going into this experience is to know like what I have said will be honored and I have given them some autonomy to say if you're doing well and we've reached your boundary, do we have your permission to make our own decision? And the answer for me is yes. And it doesn't have to be yes for you guys listening. Like you can absolutely say, no, this is my boundary. This is my line in the sand. Please do not cross it. You have every right to say that. I feel confident in my husband and in the people in our life and in the medical team that we've chosen to make that decision outside of myself if it comes to that. But this is a terrible conversation to have. What advice do you have for people in having this conversation? What have you guys seen at the AFE Foundation? I think that would be really helpful for people too to know like what does the data say?
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to speak from an anecdotal point of view. I want to be very clear about that because obviously the data on AFE in general is limited. I'd be curious if there's any data out there about like severe maternal events
Mm.
and like life support, et cetera. I doubt there is, but something that I think is important is, and I'm not trying to sway anyone's decisions, but no one fights like moms. I have seen some crazy, crazy things happen. And I think medical providers would agree with me on this. And something I was thinking about when you were like, and if you get to this point, and also if you get to that point and we've tried all of the, not only the medical pieces, but has skin to skin happened? I want to know if skin to skin has happened at that point. Now, am I saying that's going to like miraculously bring every patient around? No, I'm not. But there is something about the fight that moms have, especially when they know that their baby is there. I cannot explain it. There is no like way that I can explain that other than that. And I think that is my biggest reasoning. Like, I have seen these cases of people who are looking worse, who have significant brain injuries, who have significant, like, they had hypoxia, they had all of the things, right? And the medical outcome is looking grim. And for some, unfortunately, it does stay grim, right? We know that. We have moms who don't survive AFEs. We know that. We have moms who end up in long-term care because they weren't able to recover from those brain injuries. And we also have moms who have recovered, who have, after 16 odd days in a coma, not just sedated, in a coma, like not able to wake up themselves when sedation is lifted, who suddenly come back around and are quite literally living what would be seen as normal lives. And so when you make these really hard decisions, I think it's like the same as anything we do with like advanced directives or people who have DNRs. Like, it's all like hard conversations to have, but important ones to have so that your wishes are kept, right? Like, the worst thing that could happen is if you have very specific wishes for the use of life support and how long you would be on it, and for that to not be known. Because the hardest thing for a loved one is to make that decision completely on their own. They're not going to be able to. They love you so much. There's not going to be a point at which they are going to necessarily feel comfortable making that decision without your insight or your thought. So if you have very strong opinions, I would absolutely, as hard as this conversation is, and as it makes me very teary as well, I think it's a really important one. And I give you a lot of credit for having it.
There has never been another time in my life that I have thought about my own mortality more than preparing for this baby. And I know I'm probably in the minority there. I don't think a lot of people venture into this space, but I just think it really stems from me being such a strong advocate for other people, and I want that for myself as well. I have very strong opinions. I do know exactly what I would want. Like, I am someone that I would not ever want to be in long-term care. That is not my goal for myself. I either want to be able to live a life that is relatively normal, or I just am not sure that I would like to be here. And that's so morbid to say, but that's really genuinely how I feel. And I think I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's like your family is never going to do what feels like giving up on you, which
Exactly.
is ending life support. It
Yep.
feels like we're giving up on you. And I never want my family too to have to be in that position. So I'd like to give them the permission to say, this is not what he wanted. Like, she would not want this. Is our permission to actually end life support because she has voiced she wouldn't want to keep going outside of these specific circumstances. And you're right, this conversation just sucks. It sucks to talk about your own death and to have to consider that you may not survive a certain situation.
Yeah, it's hard. And it also reminds me, though, of the kind of anxiety piece of this conversation, which is that a lot of people think that telling someone that something will never happen to them is going to be more relieving of their anxiety than telling them what the plan would be if that thing were to happen. So it reminds me of conversations that I ask people to have with their providers. The number one thing that I tell people who come to my page and are like, your story's making me anxious, like, now I'm so worried about an AFE, is always, hey, talk to your provider about your worry. And when they tell you it will never happen to you, tell them that doesn't make you feel better. And what would make you feel better is for them to tell you what their protocol is when they have an AFE, or just when they have a maternal cardiac arrest or a hemorrhage. What do they do? What is their plan? Do they sim on it? Do they have simulations? machines? Do they train on it? What does it look like in their hospital? Would you need to be transferred out? Do they have ECMO? No? Okay, what's the closest facility that does? That's the type of stuff that helps people feel better. And the same goes for this conversation. Planning is actually so much better for that piece of anxiety than to pretend like it will never happen, because then it just continues to live and fester and you think about it, but there's no plan in place for if something like that were to happen.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You make such a good point of just like having this conversation with your provider prenatally and not taking what I call like bullshit answers or like beating around the bush answers for answers. Dig deep. And if they say that, you can say, I agree. I don't think it's going to happen, but I know it happens. So I'd like to actually have some answers about that. And it may give you some insight that you're not at the best hospital, right? If you are starting to feel anxiety about this and you actually are worried that it may happen, you're having premonitions or intuitive pulls, or you can feel just like in your gut, like something is going to happen in my birth, you may want to decide, or you may decide to change providers or even change hospitals altogether because you find out they don't have ECMO and that who they would transfer you to is a hospital 2 miles down the road. So why not drive 2 miles down the road and have your baby there, right? Wow, this has all been super duper insightful. Okay, I think my last question is about my instinct says type all of this up, have it written down, which that's not my advice for birth plans. I say write it down if you want, but otherwise, like having a discussion with your doula and your partner is probably enough. But when we're involving trauma, I think that having everything in one place written down so that not only your care team, but your partner and your point people and your doulas can refer back to it is super important. Would you advise people to take this to their care team and just have a discussion about it in one of their prenatals to say, hey, I've thought about this and I'd like to share it with you. And I also would like to maybe have you scan it in my patient chart so that we have it.
Yeah, I do. I would say yes is my answer. I think that this is a plan for when you cannot advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
This is a plan for when your wishes cannot be asked, the consent cannot be given. And so I would definitely write it down. That's the first thing that my yes is to. Absolutely write this down so that your partner can have it, so that your doula can have it. And I think that, yeah, if you also want your OB practice to have it, for sure. I think I would enter into that conversation in a way that's, hey, I am aware that it is unlikely. However, what helps me is preparing and planning. And so I want to share that with you because I don't know. I also feel like when you were talking about like an OB who's saying, oh, like this will never happen. My argument, and I don't mean to kick up anyone's anxiety as they're listening to this, but my argument is it happens to 100 people a year. That's teeny tiny for everyone listening. There's 3.6 million births in the US each year. Only 100 will be an amniotic fluid embolism. Someone has to be those 100, unfortunately. And so when we have these conversations, we understand that it's very rare. And so you can bring up, I understand it's very unlikely I'll end up in this situation. However, it's really important for me to have my wishes be known if I cannot speak, if I cannot make them known in those moments. And so I really like for this to be scanned into my chart, just so we have it and so that we know what my wishes are in case anything were to happen.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree more. That's just, it's so important to have your care team know what your wishes are in addition to your partner, right? I think a lot of us think, oh, if my husband knows or if my partner knows, then like I'm covered. But like you have said multiple times in the episode, is like when your partner is also traumatized, they're not operating at their fullest capacity. They can't access every piece of their brain. And it's almost unfair to put that on them, knowing that they're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah. Again, I do not think that my husband didn't have to advocate really, like a few times later on, but I had an amazing team. There's no way that he would have been able to advocate for anything. He was advocating against skin to skin. Love him. He didn't know. Not his fault. But he was legit advocating against skin to skin. So clearly not what my wishes would have been, but he didn't know. And he saw me literally go into cardiac arrest in front of him. There was nothing that he was going to be able to do in terms of advocating. And so having that written down, having the team have it, I also think it opens up the conversation of trauma-informed care with I'm just sometimes I get a little curious as to how your OB will react to you having these plans in place. And so just like being alert to like dismissal or invalidation is important because that doesn't feel good. And I'm all for like kind of second chances in a conversation. So if you say, "Hey, I'm really scared of having fill in the blank, AFE, hemorrhage," and your provider says that's never going to happen, and you say, "Hey, I know you're trying to be helpful and reassure me. However, what's more reassuring for me is to know what you would do." And then they're like, "Okay, I hear you." And then they share cool beans. But if the follow up to that is, "I really don't know why you're so hung up on this. It's never going to happen. I've never seen one in my career, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera," then I'm going to start to get a little like, is this a good fit?
Totally. You would never want to be sedated and intubated and they don't listen to your partner.
Totally.
Right? You would never want to be in a situation where you have shared your wishes with your partner and they still aren't listening to that. And I think that's true any place. It's not just when you're asking about
No,
catastrophic events, you guys. It's like even as simple as, "Hey, I'm thinking about having an unmedicated birth." And they're like, "Why would you do that?" And you're like, "I hear you. A lot of your patients have an epidural, but it's really important to me." And they're like, "Okay, just wait till you're in labor. Like, you're going to be begging for the epidural." Pay attention to when they are not receptive to what you want. And it doesn't mean they're a bad provider. It may mean, though, that they're not the best fit
good
for you,
fit. Yeah,
right? It may mean that there's just someone out there that is better trained and maybe a little bit more receptive to what your birth goals are. And that means you're going to get better support in labor. So just think about that. And I think it rings true from the very beginning meeting all the way through your postpartum visits. And obviously, this plan is encompassed in that as well.
for sure. Yeah.
Kayleigh, is there anything else that we haven't talked about or that's on your mind, or you're like, "You know what? I think when people are going to make this catastrophic plan, they need to consider this or have this conversation, or this is one thing that I would definitely think about or include."
Okay, two more really random things that just came up.
Please.
One is along with pictures and videos, someone should be documenting everything that happens each day, like a journal. Sometimes ICUs will do that, but often they're so busy, not their fault. So having a family member, like I had two people who were my best friend and my sister-in-law were in charge of documenting all of the updates from doctors as well as funny stuff that I said because I was very funny when I came out of sedation. Like lighthearted things, that's important too. And so that piece is important. Keeping again, we are losing all of this time. And so really doing your best to document that. And then, oh, a logistical one, but something that's just interesting to consider is there are some things that have to happen when you have a baby. And if you're in an extended ICU stay, those things might fall through the cracks, like your baby getting put on your insurance. So like sometimes that can like happen before, but I just remember there was like this scramble of us calling the school that we worked at, not me, my husband calling the school that I worked at to make sure that the baby was getting put on the insurance because he was about to just have this massive stay in the hospital with me. So just making sure those kind of ducks are in a row, or there's like a list somewhere of, I think we even have it on the AFE website of all the things that need to be taken care of that you wouldn't necessarily be thinking about while taking care of a loved one in the ICU.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is super duper helpful. And you guys, again, opened up with saying, I know this is a heavy topic, but if you are like me, and after hearing Kayleigh's story, and her experience and the things that she wished had gone differently, maybe this will give you some comfort in knowing that making a catastrophic plan is not manifesting a bad birth or bringing bad energy or bad juju to your birth. It is actually meant to prepare you and your family members and your partner and your care team in the very rare event that something does go catastrophically wrong, your wishes will still be honored. And if you're out there listening, being like, I actually don't care, then maybe this episode isn't for you, and maybe a catastrophic plan isn't for you. But I know for me, I do have strong feelings, I do have strong opinions, and I do have very specific decisions that I would want made for me at this point in pregnancy. And I love the way, Kayleigh, that you say, check in after they wake up, check in after they come to, and let's just make sure that you're still feeling good about the choices you're making. You're still feeling good about the things that we have implemented. And if you're not, how do you want to pivot to keep you in control of the things that are happening to you and your body and your baby? And I just think that is a really special thing that right now is probably not part of too many people's ICU stays. And it's going to start with us individuals starting to bring this into our hospitals and starting to show our ICU staff, hey, we can start to make small shifts in how we care for our ICU patients to make a really big lifelong impact. This was so good. Kayleigh, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. Can you tell us a couple of things? Can you tell us about the AFE Foundation? Because I'll take every opportunity to share about the
Yes.
AFE Foundation. And then how can people work with your team if they're listening and they have already had birth trauma, or maybe they're listening and they experienced birth trauma months, years after listening to this episode? Where can they connect with your team?
Yeah, first of all, HeHe, thank you so much for having me. It's been really cool to get to take this conversation and this concept from previous talks that we've had and bring it to the podcast. So thank you for again for having me. And you can find the AFE Foundation at afesupport.org. I cannot even tell you the incredible information that is on that website. Miranda Clausen, the founder and director, is an incredible human, AFE survivor herself as well. And there's all kinds of education resources. We also are involved in a lot of research for AFE, especially if you're a clinician. Find yourself on that website. We have free education. If you want to know about the pathophys, treatment, support for amniotic fluid embolism, completely free course. And then you can find me on Instagram or TikTok at the birth trauma underscore mama. And then our private practice website, which we treat perinatal trauma, loss, and grief, is holdinghopeperinatal.com.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being
Of
here.
course.
Listeners, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you showing up for us every week, twice a week. That's incredible. And as always, I love hanging out with you, even when we're talking about topics that are not so fun. But you know, my whole entire goal here is to prevent unnecessary birth trauma, which for some things, like AFE, like catastrophic events that are unpredictable, not every trauma is going to be preventable. However, my goal is when we encounter unpreventable trauma, we're reducing the trauma that you're experiencing. I want you to not only be able to have as least amount of trauma as possible, but I want you to have steps of how you can recover and how can we protect those around you. I love, love, love the idea of having a journal and having videos and pictures to help fill in those gaps, because I truly do think, and if you listen to my episode with Krista Dancy, you guys are going to learn that when we are able to fill in those gaps with truth, it will actually help your nervous system and your body and your mind and your soul heal in a way that if those are left, those loops are left unconnected, it's going to just persist as trauma. And so I hope today's episode, while it might have provoked a little anxiety, I hope that by the end of it, you were feeling a little empowered to go out and have these conversations with the people in your life and to make a catastrophic plan, not on the chance that you're going to have this, because I think we all know it's very rare, but in the off chance that you do find yourself in one of these situations, you will still have a voice, and the people around you who love you and are advocating for you will know exactly what your wishes are and know exactly how to advocate for you. All right, you guys, I'll see you in the next episode. Be sure to follow Kayleigh on social media and the AFE Foundation. And you can find me at Tranquility by HeHe and the.birth.lounge. Until next time, head to your app store and download the Birth Lounge app for evidence-based childbirth education and data-driven postpartum support delivered straight to your phone. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I love hanging out with you, and it is an honor to be your go-to gal when it comes to preparing for your baby. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a 5-star review and tell others why they should be listening to the Birth Lounge podcast too. You deserve to have a birth that you love with a provider that values your autonomy and respects informed consent without all the trauma that you so commonly hear about on social media. New episodes air every Wednesday and Friday. Hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. I'm HeHe, and this is the Birth Lounge Podcast.